Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and now you can see my face. I figured it was finally time to incorporate my webcam into my videos like this. I think it just makes them more personal, less boring to look at. And if you watched my video from the other day, you'll know that I'm becoming a Demons fan pretty fast, mainly because of that new Bellacord attachment. And the god who has taken my heart in terms of rules and models has very much been KHORNE. There's a lot of really cool models and units in here, so we're going to rank them. This is going to be on sort of my usual metrics, how cool they are, how good the model is, and how strong I think they are, how fun I think they are. I'm not going purely off of how competitive is this unit, even though I like to evaluate a model's strength. So I generally broke this up sort of into like the infantry and grunts, and then you have the mounted, then the monsters, and so on and so forth. First up, though, we got the Skull Altar. This thing is cheeks supreme, even. It doesn't really do anything. It just gives you a 6-inch aura of reroll Battle Shock and your Shadow of Chaos, but this is always going to be in your deployment zone, which is already in your Shadow of Chaos. And I don't think the model's that cool. When it comes to terrain, I like it to look like something interesting, you know what I'm saying? So this kind of fails in every regard. Just like, that's my way of thinking of it. I'm going to give it a D. I just don't think it does anything that cool. Next up, we have the rank and file of KHORNE's demonic legions. We have the Bloodletters. I think the Bloodletters are really, really good. With their recently buffed movement, they move at 8 inches, so they're nice and fast. They hit pretty darn hard. They're about 110 points, if I'm not mistaken, so 11 points per model, but they've got 2 attacks at strength 5, AP 2, and damage 2 that hit on 3s. That's really good. I'll take that every day of the week. They get +1 to charge, and they have effectively 6+ leadership, or 5+ in the Shadow of Chaos, which means you're going to be constantly healing so long as you have the Shadow of Chaos. Of course, in the KHORNE detachment, you can get that nice advance and charge all the time, which is just fantastic for this unit, obviously, along with the scouting enhancement. You can put that on these guys. They're super fast. They're pretty small. The biggest drawback with these guys, in my opinion, is their models. I think they're just a little static. I don't think the design needs a major rework, just reposing, mainly. But I think these models are great, and they play really well with one of my other favorite units that we'll get to a little later. So I'm going to give these guys, I'm probably going to give them an A tier. I think they're really solid. They have that 4+ invulnerable save, and with how fast they are, and with their lack of shooting, they can advance pretty freely whenever they aren't going to be charging something. It shouldn't be hard for them to jump from building to building to stay hidden, and especially once you add on the Bloodmaster, for example. You get that extra consolidation movement, and with how devastating they are to infantry, and with the +1 to wound from the Bloodmaster, it can be very easy for them to just carve units up, jump into something else, and just be a real pain to get rid of before they easily make their points back. With the right buffs, these guys are capable of, taking down a Storm Surge, really, really easily, too. It's not even like a stretch, you have to roll really hot. You can just do it with ease. So yeah, Bloodletters, super dangerous. Just wish their models were maybe a little more dynamic. Makes me want to go to a third party and look for something that's a little more visually interesting. Next up, we have the Flesh Hounds of KHORNE, so KHORNE's dogs, of course. These guys, I think, are totally fine. They don't have as much melee power as the Bloodletters. Sorry, I forgot their name for a second. But they move 12 inches, so they're stupid fast, right? They get to jump off the board, return to reserves if they're not in engagement range, which isn't out of the question, so to speak. Let me see. Hold on. Chair movement? No. I guess my chair's already at the max height. I might need to reformat my camera later, but whatever. You get to see my shelf of stuff. Anyways, the Flesh Hounds, I think, are pretty solid. They have a bunch of flamer attacks, and massed flamers can be useful for getting rid of things like Gretchen that the Bloodletters don't really want to be fighting, just because there's so many of them, and it's a waste of a really good melee. And they're just great sort of secondary units, because if I'm not mistaken, they do not have like OC0, like certain other sort of hound units, like the Fenrisian Wolves or Nurglings even. I'm going to quickly double check that on my other monitor while I continue talking. Model-wise, I think they're fantastic. I think they make really good grunts, and they just they add a nice sort of different vibe to your KHORNE army. I think they pull off the demonic beastly look very well. The frills is very cool. Reminds me a lot of Dilophosaurus from Jurassic Park, even though it's a really terrible depiction of that dinosaur. It's a cool design. Like, I'm not going to say it is not. But hold on, I just want to double check. Do they have OC0? Nope, they have OC1, so they're still good for objectives. And they get to jump off the board to reserves. And if you're fighting something like Thousand Suns, and they're throwing smites or warp fires at you, they do have a 3+ feel no pain against psychic, and they are naturally 2 wounds. So they are pretty darn tough, and they're fast, and they have OC. Pretty solid for objectives, in my opinion. I'm going to be giving these guys a B tier, just because they're not as apocalyptic as a lot of the other KHORNE damage dealers are. Next up, we're on to Karanak, who recently went to Legends. Which is interesting. He's a pretty recent model. I'm not entirely sure why he went to Legends. Hold on, I'm going to click this one up. Just to add in a little bit more lighting. We're still figuring out this whole camera thing, aren't we? But Karanak, he basically leads Fleshhounds, unsurprisingly. He is Cerberus Fleshhound. It's obviously what his inspiration is. And with that, he gets a quarry rule, effectively, where you mark a unit and then they get lethal hits against it, if I'm not mistaken. He also just brings some extra melee and extra firepower to the unit. I think he's a fine upgrade for your Fleshhounds if you want them to just be more of an assassin-type unit. And with how fast they are, that definitely isn't out of the question. He's an epic hero, so he cannot benefit from Bellacor's detachment, which is a shame. He would love advance and charge. But still, I think Karanak, very solid, and I think his model's pretty cool, too. I like the 3-headed dog look, obviously. It's very classic underworld demonic imagery, which KHORNE very much goes for. It's very much archetypal demons in KHORNE. I'm going to be giving him a B tier. Well, yeah, I guess a B tier is a fine place for him to go. Yeah, he's only 65 points, so I don't see why I wouldn't put him up there. I think he's just he's a good upgrade if you want your Fleshhounds to be more like hunting dogs rather than just objective grunts that can really chew up light infantry. Because I say they have, sort of poor melee, but that's not entirely true. It's kind of like orks, where even their mediocre melee is still pretty good. These guys are they're like strength 4 AP 1 or strength 5 AP 1 damage 1, which is totally fine. Next up, we have the Bloodmaster. This is the Herald of KHORNE, or one of the Heralds of KHORNE, I should say. Great model. He gives your Bloodletters +1 to wound, which is fantastic, especially with a buff we'll get into in a minute. His own melee is very good. It's 5 attacks, hit on 2, strength 6, AP 2, damage 3. Very good for carving up Terminators or crisis suits, things like that. And he gives them Consolidate 6 inches, which is really useful, especially if you get them into combat early, because you could carve up pretty much anything in the game that isn't a chaff horde very easily, and then jump into something else, and tie that up. And since the Bloodletters force desperate escape, that can definitely have value in just making it so your enemy has a harder time backing up. And even if they can't fall back, then you carve them up that turn and charge onto something else. I think the Bloodmaster is just a super good model. Or a super good unit in general. Model, I think, is okay. I actually prefer his previous generation model. But I think he gets the right balance of not looking too flashy while still being easily delineated as a leader, which makes sense for KHORNE, in my opinion. I think he's just super solid. I'm going to give him an A. I may even I'm going to bump him up to an S, because he really unlocks Bloodletters into going from great infantry damage dealers to kill anything in the game. Like, there's nothing Bloodletters can't mess up in combat. Next up, we have Skulltaker, who is an epic hero, and one of KHORNE's best boys, you could say. He's a herald, specifically one that is meant to hunt champions. He does give his unit devastating wounds, which is really good, obviously. Having 20 devastating wounds attacks alongside his own blood blade is very good. He gets to reroll wounds against characters, so any character he faces, he's likely to get, 2 or 3 mortal wounds, or 2 or 3 dev wounds through, which, damage 3, that's probably going to kill them. You get your command point for destroying characters, or monsters, I should say, or monsters. I think Skulltaker's model is pretty solid. He's another one where I kind of like his older model more, but not in a way that, I think the new model's bad. I just kind of prefer the vibes of the older one. But I think this model still very solid. I think he's very good. I think I prefer the generic one. Now, that may just be because I'm a Legion of Shadow player, so I want to use, like, I can't use Skulltaker. I just have to settle for a Bloodmaster. But the Bloodmaster already makes the unit so devastating. I think it sort of evens out, obviously. You won't be wounding as much with Skulltaker's unit, but there'll be more dev wounds. But you'll be wounding more just on your good AP with the Bloodmaster. And the Bloodmaster and the Skulltaker is, 20 points more expensive. I think that just about balances out. I'm going to put him in A tier behind this guy, but I think that is mainly just because I play Shadow Legion, where I can't take this guy. I think these guys are definitely, they're neck and neck. If you have the points, Skulltaker might be worth the upgrade if you don't want to use an enhancement of any kind. But yeah, I think both these units are very solid. I think a lot of the KHORNE demons are really good. Next up, we have the Skullmaster. This is the Herald of KHORNE on Juggernaut. This guy is probably the least apocalyptic on his own, but Bloodcrushers themselves already can do a lot of damage to just about anything in the game. Are you noticing a pattern here? Are you noticing a pattern? A lot of these KHORNE units just hit insanely hard, and Bloodcrushers are no different. This guy mainly just brings the Blood Blade, which gives you that nice damage 3. He does make all your Juggernaut horns on the Juggernauts devastating wounds, which is nice because you get, 28 attacks or 32 attacks with the character attached. So no matter what you're attacking, you're going to at least get a couple of dev wounds through, which can be useful. And then you put that on top of adding another body to the Bloodcrushers, so you get to roll 76, and for every 4+, that's D3 mortal wounds. Not out of the question that you can just straight up blow up light vehicles just on the charge and then, consolidate into something else. They're really dangerous, and the Skullmaster is sort of just a luxury pick. If you have the points, he's definitely worth it. If you don't, I think Bloodcrushers can still do fine, but you just get more value. It's just effectively adding another Skullcrusher, or another Bloodcrusher to the unit. Which I think is totally fine. I just want to double check to make sure I'm not forgetting any rules that he has. Again, I like to be thorough. Fury, yeah. Yeah, so when you charge with your Bloodcrushers, you get your dev wounds. And he also makes the enemy take a battle shock test, which isn't the most useful. I suppose if you're doing some strange rivalry stuff with Slaanesh, this could be useful, because the Transweaver marks a battle shocked unit for full rerolls. This is a way to do that, but I'd rather do it with Skull Cannons. You're mainly buying this guy just for his own melee and getting dev wounds on your Juggernaut-bladed horns. I would give this guy probably a lower A tier, is where I'm going to put him. I could probably bump him down. I'm going to bump him down to a B, but just because I think he is just a luxury pick for Juggernauts, which are already good. And speaking of, we have the Bloodcrushers here. Oh, and his model is resin, which is very unfortunate. I'd like to see him get an update. His Juggernaut just looks very simple compared to these guys. So next up, we have Juggernauts themselves on Bloodcrushers. These guys are, mounted shock troopers, basically. They have 10-inch moves, so they're nice and fast. They're toughness 7, so really resilient to things like bolters, flamers, accursed weapons, things like that. They have 4 wounds apiece, so they are pretty tough, with their 4+ invulnerable save. They actually also have a 3+ normal save now, which is important, because if you're getting attacked by pulse rifles, stuff like that, saving on a 3+ is a lot better than saving on a 4. These guys, though, I think are really good. Again, they get to shower the enemy in mortal wounds, which means their damage is just very consistent. The Juggernaut-bladed horns have lance, so you're going to stack saves on whatever you're attacking, even more so if you have the Skullmaster. Then they just get a flurry of the same attacks that what are they called? Bloodletters get. The strength 5 AP 2 damage too. Very solid. If you have a big unit of them, which I think is the proper way to run them, just because you want to hit whatever you're charging with, that's going to average, I think, like 6 to 10 mortal wounds on whatever you're charging. Something along those lines. If you roll really hot, you could get up to, in theory, 21 mortal wounds, but that's probably not going to happen very often. But yeah, you'll hit something for a good chunk of their health, no matter what it is, that's going to leave them hurt. And then you're just stacking a lot of really good attacks, stacking a lot of saves on your enemy to finish them off. I think that they make a very solid choice. And I think they're also a good option in Bellacor's detachment for advance and charge, which is great. That's why I'm using them in Shadow Legion. And also they can get the Scouts benefit, a Scouts leader ability if you want to use that. Even though I am using it on Bloodletters, I could easily just switch it to my Bloodcrushers. I think these guys are absolutely fabulous. I'm going to be giving them an A tier. I think these guys are really, really fantastic. I'd probably put them here, honestly. Maybe I'll move Skulltaker down and put them here. I don't know. This isn't a super concrete order. Like, these could go in any order, just depending on what I wanted to show. These guys are all equal in my mind. Next up, we have probably my favorite KHORNE unit. We have the Master on Skullthrone, so yet another Herald of KHORNE. This guy, he moves 9 inches. He's toughness 9, 9 wounds, 165 points, so pricey, but he at least does have some bulk to back it up. His melee is pretty much a standard. It's a KHORNE plus 2 Bloodletters, which is not terrible, but for the price isn't ecstatic until you take a look at his special rule. At the start of the fight phase, you select one enemy unit within 18 inches that's visible to this guy, and then all KHORNE units that attack him get +1 strength, AP, and damage. So for himself, that would bump his Bloodblade up to strength 7, AP 3, damage 4. It would bump the attendant's attacks up to strength 7, AP 3, damage 3, or strength 6, AP 3, damage 3. For example, the Bloodcrushers, that would bump their horns, because the only thing, you can still affect extra attack weapons, you just can't give them extra attacks. So you're getting up to damage 2 Juggernaut horns. These guys, again, 20 attacks, strength 6, AP 3, damage 3. With this guy with +1 to wound, you're just going to be tearing things up. It's crazy. Now, I'm not sure if this guy is like the most meta pick, but how could I leave home without that? He just marks a unit for death, and it doesn't matter how big or how tough it is, it's probably just dead from whatever unit's in combat with it. Just because of how many... Because almost everything KHORNE has is damage 2 at the least, and jumping to damage 3 is a huge boost, especially against Terminators. You know, Terminators could slow Bloodletters down, but not when they're carving them to pieces with every single failed save, and since they're accurate, they really can easily wipe a squad of Terminators. Even a big squad is in real threat of getting carved up. This guy is an S tier. I will never leave home without a Red Master on Skullthrone. He's just too fun. And I mean, isn't that the greatest thing? It's just, boom, you are going to die. And then saying, oh, you failed 7 saves, that's 21 damage. Or, you know, you failed 13 saves, oh, you know, that's only 39 damage. That's just fun, isn't it? Next up, we have the Skull Cannon, one of the very few ranged options for KHORNE. Something I'd like to see maybe a little more of. This thing, of course, is a giant cannon, same profile as the other, as the Master. Though only just a couple... Its melee is not bad, actually. It still has a few Bloodblade attacks. It's just a, what is it, D6 +2 with Blast, Strength 9, AP 1, Damage 2. Good for blasting infantry. The main thing you'd bring this for probably... Honestly, I think its Battle Shock rule isn't that bad. Just because you have to hit the enemy with it. I know it sees some use in Chaos Knights, or at least it used to. I think this actually works really better with Slanesh demons, because a lot of them feed off of the enemy being battle shocked. So smacking them with a few skull cannons, totally valid. Yeah, I think the skull cannon's fine. I'm not as strong. I don't feel as strongly about it as a lot of the other units. I'll probably give it a B tier, because it's some nice fire support just to clear out some infantry that, you know, your units could kill, but they're probably better off charging something more valuable. So having a few skull cannons, I think, is totally valid. I just don't think they're going to be game winners. Basically, they're just there. They're kind of like you know, greasing the gears, right, to make sure everything runs smoothly. If there's a horde in the way, a couple skull cannons will blast them to pieces, and then your other units can just quickly move through and cut up anything else. Next up, we have the Soul Grinder with the Mark of KHORNE, which gives him a 2d6, Strength 5, AP 1, Damage 1 Flamer, which is definitely nice, as he doesn't really want to be fighting. He doesn't want to be fighting hordes, because his damage is dedicated to blowing up tanks, basically. Though if you give him the Warp Claw, he definitely can clear some infantry. I think he's just better off going for the biggest things in the game. He's very tough. He's toughness 11 with 14 wounds, I think it is. Moves 8 inches, he gets to move over terrain that's small. With KHORNE, of course, he gets that extra phlegm, or not phlegm, it's burning breath, I think is what they call it, something along those lines. But you're mainly getting him for that big anti-tank melee. It's strength 16, AP 2, damage d6 plus 2. And since he has KHORNE, don't forget, you can juice him with this. Not maybe the most necessary, but he definitely will struggle to crush things with high wound counts, just because his attack count is pretty low. But I think the greatest thing this guy does is he's a really good distraction unit. He's tough. You will need to dedicate actual firepower to kill him. His melee is damaging enough that if you ignore him, you're really going to pay the price. He will very quickly make his points back. And he's pretty hard to slow down, just because he can bowl through ruins pretty easily. Again, really good in Shadow Legion, because then he gets advance and charge. Advance shoot and charge, I should say. So he gets to advance, fire off his battle cannon effectively. It's a 3-shot battle cannon. And then his flamer, and then he gets to charge something. So he's very scary, very fast. So you really do. Your enemy has to respect this thing, or they're really going to pay the price for it. I'm going to be giving this guy probably a B tier as well. I don't think he's as much of a superstar as a lot of the other KHORNE dedicated units are, but he's also an undivided unit. So if you needed to flex into something else, he definitely could. With Tzeentch, he gets a las cannon type attack, which is definitely very good. Also, don't comment about that voice crack. Don't do it. Yeah, I think this guy, solid. Solid as can be. Great as a utility distraction unit that will put the hurt on the enemy. I just think these other units are more your superstars. This guy does make a great meat shield, effectively. Next up, this is our representative of the Demon Prince, with wings and without. So with KHORNE, they get +2 strength, so their Hellforged weapons go up to strength 10, strength 8, depending on the profile. Definitely nice to make him more effective against vehicles where he really struggles. He's more of an anti-infantry slayer, but with this, he definitely becomes more effective against vehicles and infantry for that matter. Aside from that, you can't use these guys in Shadow Legion. No Demon Princes except for Be'lakor. But I think it's a fine upgrade. Out of all the gods, it's probably 3rd place, I'd say, or maybe 2nd place. Nurgle gives him the extra toughness. Tzeentch gives him extra attacks on his Infernal Cannon, which I think is slightly pointless. Slaanesh gives him extra movement, fairly standard stuff. If you're on foot, you get 1 phase of 3+ invulnerable save, which can definitely prove to be an issue if this guy just deep strikes right in your enemy's face, and then 3+ invulnerable. And he does do enough damage that your enemy has to respect him. They can't just ignore it. He will carve up your infantry, and with KHORNE, he will carve up most vehicles, except things like their toughness 12, where he'll struggle. I think this guy, again, totally solid, just not a superstar pick, in my opinion. And with wings, you get 3 extra attacks, so there's definitely something to be said there. Yeah, I'd say they're both probably around B tier, for me personally. They're passing, not excelling. That's my general consensus. S is units I think that are just excellent. A are units that I think are doing, top of the class. They're going to be your breadwinners. B, they're great. They're good units, but they're not your superstars. C is a fine unit that I don't see much of a purpose in, and D is trash. Just trash mode, trash boat, one might say. Next up, we have Bloodthirster of. This is Wrath of KHORNE Bloodthirster, from the higher tiers of KHORNE Bloodthirsters, because he has the flail. So this guy has the small axe, which is hard-hitting, but not as hard-hitting as the great axe. It's 8 attacks, strength 14, AP 3, damage D3 plus 1, or a bunch of sweep attacks at damage 2. But the main thing is he gets his big lash, right? And he whips that at enemies, and it does. It's pretty powerful attack. Strength 16, I think it's AP 2, D6 plus 2 damage with dev wounds. So you could whip that at someone and just, heavily damage a tank. Personally, out of the 3, I think it's probably the worst loadout. Just because, A, you have the worst axe, because the great axe just hits significantly harder. And the big lash, while it is or big flail, I should say, is a fun meme attack. It's kind of like a Thundershock harpoon in the way it's probably going to bounce, or a Hunter Killer Missile. Thankfully, it's not one shot, so you can just keep whipping it at enemies. But it just doesn't really help the Bloodthirster do anything that it doesn't already do very well. Because Bloodthirsters, they charge into melee and just smash anything into a million pieces in one round of combat. This guy is sacrificing a lot of that potential for the small chance that you whip a tank for 8 damage. Which if you just brought the axe, you can do anyways. Yeah, I think this guy is probably going to be our first C tier. I think, again, it's still a Bloodthirster. He's still fine. He still carves things up pretty well. I just think the other loadouts are better. Next up, we have the Bloodthirster of Unfettered Fury, which is the lowest rank a Bloodthirster can be. Of course, still a Bloodthirster. Again, small axe, so significantly reduced anti-tank damage. But he gets the whip. And the whip, I think, it has more purpose than the flail. Because it's 8 attacks, I think. It's strength 8, AP 1, damage 2. So what this does is it gives the Bloodthirster a way to get rid of chaff more efficiently. Because a Bloodthirster is, apocalyptic in the damage it deals in melee. But if you're stuck on a bunch of guardsmen, then what do? So with the whip and the flame attack, his fire breath attack, he can pretty easily clear a horde out of the way and then go for the Leman Russ or the Rogel Dorn that's right behind it, or a Land Raider, whatever it may be. It allows him to hit things a lot harder. All the Bloodthirsters love Bellacor's detachment for advance and charge and scouting. You can give these guys scouts 9 inches, which just puts an enormous amount of pressure on your enemy turn 1, with how fast they are and how deadly they are. I'll be giving this loadout probably a high B. I think the main thing is just I feel that I just want my Bloodthirster to one-tap whatever it's fighting in melee. And the best way to do that is the Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage with the Great Axe of KHORNE. So the Great Axe of KHORNE is a truly nasty melee weapon. Obviously, all the Bloodthirsters hit hard. That's not a surprise. Or even, it's not like a ridiculous thing to say. But the Great Axe of KHORNE is just heinous. Strength 16, AP 4, D6 plus 2, 7 attacks, hit on 2s. So you're already carving through most things in the game very, very easily. And again, you're still a tough Bloodthirster, right? Your toughness 11, 18 wounds, all that jazz. I just think that it's the best loadout, personally. Just messed up my hair. Now I look ridiculous. Put that back there. Now I look beautiful, don't I? Now I look insane. Hold on. I still look insane. I think I'm just going to look insane for the rest of the video. Why don't I just look insane for the rest of the video? Yeah, why not? Let's just look insane. What's wrong with looking insane? Put this over my shoulder. Back to what I was talking about. Great Axe of KHORNE, I just think is the best loadout, because it's doing what the Bloodthirster wants to do. Get into melee, kill whatever you're fighting, and then, go do something else. Really good in Bellacor's detachment because he can get the Warp Talons ability, which is how I run mine. So you rapid ingress, advance and charge into something, probably kill it, and then jump off the board, which just is really frustrating for your opponent, of course. That's a really nasty ability. Warp Talons are mainly kept in check in that their damage isn't that general purpose, but the Bloodthirster is not that. With his sweep mode, he can carve up Space Marines, infantry pretty easily. Against vehicles, obviously, he's going to just split them in half. No questions asked. He's just going to split them in half. Yeah, I mean, this is an easy S tier, personally. Not my favorite unit. I think that still goes to the Renmaster. Also because this guy pairs hilariously with the Renmaster. Just mark a unit for death, and then that Bloodthirster, the small chance that you were going to make it through melee with a Bloodthirster evaporates. You'll be up to AP 5, damage D6 plus 3, strength 17. There's really not a whole lot that can take that and survive. Very specific things. Great Unclean Ones could probably take it, but then if you slap on the KHORNE stratagem from Bellacor's detachment, probably could kill it, because you'd get, again, more. You'd get lance, so you'd be wounding it more effectively. so you get rid of its main durability, which is its toughness. Again, fantastic unit. Just love it. Again, he does all the standard sort of greater demon stuff. Every demon that's of KHORNE around him hits better, which is very nice. He showers mortal wounds at the end of the fight phase to finish off anything that survived. And he gives them the Shadow of Chaos, which is handy for himself and for others, because it allows him to heal himself, allows his Bloodletters to regenerate faster. Bloodthirster with the Great Axe, just fabulous in my opinion. I think that, again, the other loadouts are fine, but if you're going to go Bloodthirster, go big or go home. That's my thought process. Next up, we have Skarbrand, who is nuts. Skarbrand is cracked, to put it lightly. Skarbrand has built-in advance and charge, which is nice because you cannot use him in Bellacor's detachment. And his damage is pretty much no different than a regular Bloodthirster. Of course, after KHORNE threw him through the entire warp and his wings got ripped up, he's a bit slower. He only moves 10 inches. I know, so sluggish. But he hits crazy hard in melee. He has flat damage 6 on his strike mode, which is definitely is sort of a side grade, because you're going to be averaging with d6 plus 2, 4 or 5 damage. So it's just more consistent, but less spiky. He has some pretty interesting abilities. Obviously, everyone within range is a Shadow of Chaos. But instead of giving +1 to hit, he gives +1 attacks, which most of the KHORNE infantry have 2 attacks, so that's a 50% damage buff right there. And of course, built-in advance and charge means that while he is technically slower in most detachments, he is going to be just as fast as a regular Bloodthirster. His Flamer attack is a little stronger. It's at strength 8, AP 1, damage 1. And that's, Skarbrand is insane. There's just no way to beat around the bush. For the same price as a Bloodthirster, he's just better. He is just better. Fortunately, cannot use him as I run Bellacor's detachment. But Skarbrand, I'm not gonna. He's insane. He's cracked. He's cracked out of his mind. He's up here. And finally, we have one of the coolest models, but unfortunately, a bit of a sour note to end on. This is Angrath the Unbound, who KHORNE made right after Skarbrand punched him in the back. Angrath is supposed to be, or in lore, is the strongest Bloodthirster. Him and Skarbrand hate each other. They want to fight. KHORNE doesn't allow it because he doesn't want either of them to get murdered, because they just spill so much blood. Why would he want that? Angrath, unfortunately, sucks cheeks. He's cheeks. Model is really cool. If you want to use the model, totally get it. He is way bigger than a regular Bloodthirster, muscle-wise. Given the Bloodthirster's pose, they're about the same height, but Angrath is just, he's brawling, he's huge. And I do quite like his pose. It's very imposing. He's about to carve through a dozen men. But Angrath just kind of sucks. He does have 6 more wounds than a Bloodthirster, but he just has the same melee. His melee is no better. I think he has +1 attack, actually. He has +1 attack, which is nice, but he doesn't give the +1 to hit. He doesn't give +1 attacks. He doesn't have the Shadow of Chaos aura. He does have reroll battle shock tests, which is handy, especially when you do have the Shadow of Chaos already extended to the midboard and the enemy's deployment zone. But yeah, he's just kind of a Bloodthirster, but more expensive. The wounds are nice, I'll admit. And he has a slightly better whip. So I guess there is some value to having the benefits of this whip, though without the AP, and full power melee. There definitely is some value to that. I'm being harsh calling him terrible. I just think if you have the points and you don't plan on using, you're just bringing one Bloodthirster, Angrath is probably a fine choice. But you'd probably get more value out of Skarbrand, who's 120 points cheaper. This is the main thing. Angrath, I think, is just too expensive. Even though he does have a slightly upgunned whip, I think he's unfortunately going to fall to C tier, which is a shame because his model's really cool. His lore's really cool. If you have this model, just run it as a regular Bloodthirster. We'll have to put him on a smaller base than usual, but this model is... I've never seen it. Actually, no, I think I saw it at Warhammer World. I don't know if they have him at Warhammer World. I guess I just completely left my mind. Just use him as a regular Bloodthirster. He's just too expensive. He's 425 points. He also, I think, he might be... He is Titanic. I just had to double check. He is Titanic, which definitely has its downsides. Yeah, Angrath, unfortunate, but a great model nonetheless, which is awesome. I still think he's usable, just not exceptional. And he's a Legends data sheet, just so you know. Anyways, that covers that. I hope you enjoyed me having my face cam on. I think it does add a little bit more of a personal touch. And I hope my enthusiasm for KHORNE Demons came through. And I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.